All right, welcome everyone today. My name is Abby Wyrather, and I am the manager at the Family Caregiver Center. And our focus today is going to be talking about the stress faced by caregivers, sometimes the extra stress you might face at the holidays, how to navigate that, and to cope with some of those things that may happen. So first off, we are going to talk a little bit about what is stress. So stress is the feeling of being overwhelmed or unable to cope with mental or emotional pressures. It actually is a natural feeling, but can become a chronic condition if not managed. It's usually caused by situations or events that maybe put pressure on us. It's times when we don't have control or have a lot to think about. And like I said, it can be a motivator and can be essential for survival. But however, when the body becomes triggered too easily, or maybe there's too many things that are stressing you out at one time, it can undermine your mental, physical, and emotional health. So there are some things as a caregiver that can add additional stress in your life and are what might be considered risk factors. So living with the person you're caring for sometimes can cause additional stress. Maybe if you're socially isolated, if you're someone who's experienced depression in the past, having additional stress can kind of add to that depression. Maybe financially, things are difficult for you right now. The higher numbers of hours that are spent caregiving, if you kind of lack coping skills or have difficulty solving problems, that can add to stress as well. And if you lack the choice in becoming a caregiver, some people don't have that choice and feel kind of stuck in that role. There's a lot of extensive research about caregiving, health and well-being, and how stress can really negatively impact those. And I just want to share a couple stats. So if you are a caregiver spouse between the ages of 66 and 96 and are experiencing additional mental or emotional strain, the risk that you have of developing a chronic condition or actually dying is 63% higher than those of people your age who are not caregivers. And that number is not quite as high if you're an adult child who's caring for someone. But if you're trying to juggle work, maybe you have adolescent children, you have an increased risk for depression, chronic illness, and a decline in your quality of life too. So I'm not saying all of this stuff to scare you, because caregiving obviously can be very rewarding too. But it's important as we talk about, some of the things later in this presentation to really try to make sure you're caring for yourself too as you continue to be a caregiver. So hopefully we'll give you some tips today that'll help. So some signs of caregiver stress that you might recognize in yourself or in others that are caregivers: feeling overwhelmed or worried. Maybe you're tired often or have headaches or muscle aches. You might notice you're more forgetful, irritable, or easy to anger, which doesn't always help your relationship then if you're at that point. Maybe you've developed poor eating habits, or you're not sleeping well. You might be withdrawing socially. Or, a common thing caregivers do too is postponing their own appointments, which again can kind of sometimes catch up with you. So again, these are all signs of stress that hopefully we can try to kind of navigate as you receive support from the center if you're interested, or as we talk about some tips today. So what's some types of stress that's common during the holidays? Just in general, hosting sometimes can be stressful. If you're traveling somewhere, maybe you have difficult family members that come to events. There's also the social and societal pressures to have a perfect event. This time of year, there's a lot of pressure to have a packed social calendar. Maybe too much activity can cause you to feel overwhelmed. Kind of going along that, managing those expectations and traditions. I don't know about you guys, my family has some really strong traditions that we do every year. And, our holidays are pretty jam-packed, and it's fun and it's wonderful, but it can be really exhausting too. So that sometimes is one thing that maybe could cause some additional stress. Trying to maintain, your routine. So if you eat a certain way, exercise, sleep, um, I feel like after Thanksgiving, I definitely probably put on a few pounds with all the food that we ate. And again, it was wonderful, but different than our usual routine. Giving gifts sometimes can be stressful, or finding the perfect gift for someone. And then there can be experiences, obviously, with grief and loss around the holidays too, feelings of sadness or loneliness, especially if you've lost someone. But sometimes those change in traditions or expectations as you might be caregiving for someone. So we're going to break these down a little bit and talk, well, after the slide, and talk a little bit more about how to help with some of those things. But some general tips to kind of help you get through the holidays. So first, again, the holidays can be a really fun time of year, but sometimes it can be stressful, like we've said. So the first step to kind of preventing that stress is actually just taking the time to acknowledge your feelings. Realize again that it's okay to express those feelings. You might be feeling sad or grieving a loss, and it's okay to not force yourself to be happy just because it is the holidays. And if you are happy, if you're feeling joyful, then that's wonderful too. But just try to keep a pulse on how you're doing, and listen to yourself and your gut and your feelings. Planning ahead can be really useful. So, trying to do things in advance, setting up specific days for shopping, baking, connecting with others, trying not to do things last minute. I know online shopping has become really popular. If you can get gifts in advance, and obviously this year that might be a little hard too, but that'll prevent that last minute scrambling that can sometimes happen and add to the stress. Being realistic, learning how to say no. So again, the holidays, sometimes there's a lot of expectations for things to be perfect, or maybe just like years past. As families tend to grow and change, traditions and the rituals that you have change as well. So try to figure out which ones are the most important to you. And if that's difficult, maybe list them all out. What are your most favorite things that you have done in the past? And identify those ones that are really meaningful to you. And maybe those are the ones realistically that you can do this year, and that's okay. And then learning to say no to those things that maybe are too much for you. And again, that's okay too. I know sometimes it can be hard for other friends or family to recognize that, but learning how to say no is a really big strength, because if you're able to do that, you're able to set boundaries, and hopefully your friends and family will recognize that that's a plus too, and understand why you're saying that. Setting aside differences. So at our house, we definitely put out some no discussion topic rules. So religion, politics, and most recently COVID, we have some very different and polarizing views. And unfortunately, they'll only lead to arguments if discussed when we're trying to enjoy each other's company. So we try to keep the conversation light, and we turn to games if needing distraction. It doesn't mean that you need to avoid these topics, but maybe setting aside those differences until a more appropriate time can be a better way to enjoy your holidays. Try not to abandon those healthy habits that you might have. So, going for a walk, getting outside if it's nice enough out, trying to eat well, or doing those things that bring you joy and feed your soul are really extra important, especially if you're thinking you might be dealing with some stress around the holidays. Taking a breather. So again, making some time for yourself, finding something you enjoy. Maybe it's just spending 15 minutes alone. This is, kind of a weird example, but I have to take my dog out to the dog park all the time because she's a little crazy. And it's most of the time a chore. But one thing that I've noticed recently that's really peaceful is when you go to the dog park in the dark, you can really see the stars out there, which has been very cool. And recently there's been planets that have lined up that I would never have saw if I was at my house. So that has kind of been a peaceful moment for me in the midst of, some hectic planning that's been going on. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, whether that's family or friends to kind of help with the planning or preparation, or, reaching out to the center here. If you need help prioritizing things, we are more than happy to help you. Okay, so breaking down some of those holiday, events that might be happening. So gatherings or hosting an event. Gatherings obviously can be a lot of fun, but they also can be a lot of work too. And it's not just the meal or the event itself that usually is the most work. It's generally the preparation, the cleaning, maybe before or after. If you have people staying at your home, it involves preparing a space for them and catering to their needs too. And maybe if they're staying multiple days, trying to figure out, meals for the days that they're there too. So this can sometimes be exhausting in general, but also be more so if you were trying to navigate caregiving along with that. So here's some things that could make hosting a little easier. We've talked about preparation in advance. So what can you do beforehand? Can you cook some things beforehand or cut the veggies, whatever you're making? Can you make a meal plan and start getting groceries early so you don't have to wait until the last minute? Can you make a schedule every day of the week, right, where you're cleaning certain things so again, it's not the last minute. Knowing your limits, recognizing what's realistic for you to manage. And that might mean a number of people and how long are people staying. Maybe it's not realistic this year if people are coming to your house for them to actually stay in your home. Maybe that's too much. And I think that's okay to recognize too. So it's, again, trying to figure out what makes sense for you in your situation currently. Celebrating differently. So, maybe you've always had a lunch meal or, you have soup Christmas Eve that night before you go to church. Maybe for the person you're caring for, that time of day is not a good time of day anymore. So just because that's what you've always done doesn't mean that's what you have to do now. Maybe having a brunch is better. And again, it's just kind of identifying what's the best in your routine and the person you're caring for at this point. And maybe that means celebrating in a smaller way. So maybe having all 20 of your family members over is too overwhelming at this point. So what can you do to kind of simplify that? Can you have several gatherings with different family groups if that's important to you on different days? So you kind of switch things up. Or maybe you have a meal with one group of people, but you go and do something with someone else. It could also be simplifying your event. So maybe you have had large gatherings in the past, and maybe this year that's not what you're going to do. So again, can you, change things, make them a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit easier for you and the person you're caring for. Switching up your menu is another thing you can do. So sometimes food and preparation can be really stressful too. Can you order things? I know a lot of people that ordered Thanksgiving from Hy-Vee this year and felt that it was really, really good. So that's definitely something you can try. Keep things simple. It doesn't have to be a 5-course meal. It can if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. And I know we were just talking before we started this, can you make some cookies in advance and freeze them? You don't have to do everything the night before. I think preparing family before the visit is a really good thing to do. And one of the caregivers on this call actually had a really great idea about a newsletter that she sends out periodically, and updates her family on how her loved one's doing. And I have an example here after this slide we can take a look at. But if you're able to kind of give your family a heads up and say, this is how our loved one's doing, this is the best way to communicate with them, this is what we need help with at this time, then your family isn't surprised when they show up. And if they haven't seen that person in a while, at least they have a better idea of what to expect when they're there. I've been saying simplify a lot. Again, can you do things in a smaller, more simple way? If you're the one hosting and you're the primary caregiver, is there a way for those people that are coming to kind of give you the day off, maybe the next day, so they watch your person and you're able to take a break and do something that feeds your soul? Maybe they bring the food. Maybe you just prepare one thing. If you really love desserts, maybe you make that, and maybe the other people coming, kind of like a potluck, bring things too. And again, it's always okay to ask for help if you need it. Don't ever be afraid to do that. And practice self-care too. And we'll have some more tips at the end of this, but don't just expect to power through. Again, this can be a difficult time. So, spend time taking care of yourself. Okay, so let's look at this example letter. And this is just one I found online, but I think there's probably other examples out there too. But here's a letter just letting some family members know what to expect when you get there. So I'm not going to read it all, but basically it says, I'm letting you know how things are going at our house. We're looking forward to having you here. I thought it'd be helpful to help. I thought it would be helpful if you understood our current situation in advance. So talk about, things that have changed since they've seen them. Here's what's going on currently. He's having some problems remembering. Their behavior's a little unpredictable. They might not understand or know who you are. Don't be offended. He appreciates this. I like, this piece that says, please treat him or her as you would any person. We talk a lot about stigma and trying not to judge someone. So they're still the same person. So again, whatever you want to put in this letter, I think could be really, really helpful just to help people prepare as they show up. Traveling. So traveling can be also difficult at times. So if you're planning to drive, and especially if you're going a long distance or, taking a plane somewhere, take a minute to kind of think through some of these things. So recognize that it might take a little bit longer. It could take an extra day or two. My mother-in-law recently took her mother, my grandmother-in-law, by plane across country to visit some other family members. And, my grandmother-in-law, she's very capable of walking short distances. But instead of just saying, okay, we think she can walk through the airplane, they planned ahead and had a wheelchair there waiting for her, an escort to the plane itself. Because what they decided is, regardless of what she can and can't do, it changes in the moment, and it's better to have things prepared and ready than kind of wait for a crisis and then react from there. And it sounds like that process went really smoothly for them, and they were glad that they did it. So, if you're driving, it might take a couple extra days, and that's okay too. But again, if you can prepare for that, it'll reduce some of that stress and anxiety you might have. Try to think about equipment you might need for your travels. So, if you need some extra changes of clothes that aren't packed away, if your person experiences some incontinence, that might be something you might need. If your person's on oxygen, try to think about that kind of stuff. If, again, the airplane example, I think it's important to try to think about those what ifs, what are things that maybe could happen, and again, try to plan for some of those situations. I think communicating needs with the host, whoever you're staying with or wherever you're going, is important. Even if it's a hotel, they might be able to try to accommodate some specific things for you. So don't try not to sugarcoat kind of what your caregiver's condition is and their needs at this point. Make a checklist of some of those essentials to make sure, is their home accessible? Is their bathroom facility set up the way that it needs to be? Will they have the certain foods that person might need? Just to, again, prepare for anything that might happen. And if you're caring for someone living with dementia, recognize that traveling might be even more difficult. Again, it's kind of like if you're on vacation and you wake up in a different environment. You are usually kind of disoriented in the moment and confused about where you are. If you're someone living with dementia who's lived in the same home for many years, or has a very specific routine, taking someone out of that routine can be really, really challenging. So it's important, if you are traveling, to mentally recognize that could happen, and try your best to maintain whatever their regular routine is. So if they wake up at a certain time, if you have showers at a certain time, or they have, their morning toast and coffee and paper, try your best to kind of keep those things consistent. And plan for additional breaks if needed, and also just, again, recognizing they might need some increased supervision if things are a little bit more confusing. And I have an example, but my grandma had dementia. My grandparents used to drive to Texas, where they would stay during the winter. They would usually make the trip in 2 days. And eventually, as my grandma's dementia progressed, I think they extended it to 6. So those trips took a lot of my grandpa's emotional energy, because being out of the familiar was really hard for my grandma. So usually when they arrived, it would take several weeks at least for her to settle in. And they had a camper down there, so that environment was familiar to her, which was good. Luckily, they had some really amazing neighbors that would step in and give him a break and really understood the situation. But as time went on, eventually he decided the benefits of going there were not worth the emotional strain it took for him and the added confusion it was for her to get there. They also both had several health scares and decided being away from their doctors and family here was just not worth it. So again, not saying this to scare you. I just think it's good to think about your specific situation and what makes sense for you and the person you're caring with. And hopefully those people that you're going to see are understanding. And maybe that means having a virtual visit or seeing if they can come here. So we've talked a lot about managing expectations and traditions. So I think sometimes this can almost be the hardest part of navigating the holidays just in general. We all have certain expectations of what we would like for the holidays, and different traditions that we valued in the past. But as we age, in general, our holiday gatherings tend to change. So think about, maybe when you were newly married and now you have another family to attend to. Your expectations of the holiday probably have changed because there's other things that you're doing now. Or maybe your children have moved to another state and you used to gather, but now you can't because of that distance. We've all had to learn to adapt to the changes in tradition generally in the past. And I think caregivers are actually masters at adaptation. You might not always recognize it, but most of the time when something happens to the person you love, and things become harder, what do you typically do? Do you continue doing the same thing because that's what you've always done? Not generally. Most people try to find some other solution to try to make, your life as a caregiver easier, but also the person you're caring for. So try to think of the holidays in the same light. You know, don't try to do everything. It's okay to adapt if things aren't working like they have before. And sometimes it might be simplifying those old traditions you have, but maybe it's trying something new. I think there are so many different ways that you can, still have fun around the holidays and maybe simplify the crazy events or all the things that you used to do. And there's a quote from an author that I found, and her name, is Lisa Schultz. And the book is A Chance to Say Goodbye, Reflections on Losing a Parent, and Lighter Living, Decluttering, Organizing, and Simplifying. So what she said is she's been taking care of one parent or the other for many years now. She finds the holidays stressful in and out of themselves. But as a caregiver, the holiday season can seem particularly difficult. Navigating the holidays puts more work on an already exhausting list of responsibilities. The holidays can also bring up grief as memories surface of a previous Thanksgiving or Christmas where her dad was still alive or her mom was still vibrant. And each of her parents made fabulous meals in the past. And now she's the one to put the celebration together and realize she can't be both a fabulous hostess and family caregivers. So what she encourages is for caregivers is not to try to do it all. She said, mostly you're simply going to wear yourself out. So she suggests some different things. Many grocery stores, like we've talked about, offer to bake the turkey and pumpkin pie for you. And you can maybe cook something else, but let someone else do that work for you. If you get invited to eat at someone else's house, try that. You may only be asked to bring one thing. If your loved one is at an assisted living, go eat there and enjoy the time together there. Maybe do something totally different and I know a lot of people have Chinese food for Christmas Eve. Maybe try something like that to break your routine. Or take a little excursion. I know Susie's on this call, but you've mentioned, going out and looking at the lights this year. And I think that's just a really wonderful idea and probably something really fun for you and your husband too. Okay, so dealing with difficult situations. So sometimes the holidays can be, like we said, a difficult time and occasionally can bring out the worst in people. It could be those unrealistic expectations that we were mentioning. It could just be, difficult or insensitive family members that are there that are hard to deal with, and especially hard to deal with when you're caring for a person living with a chronic condition and hoping for extra support too. So one of the things that you might have to deal with is criticism. So I always like this saying, the opinions are like butts. Everyone has one, but sometimes they stink. So if you're having or going to a gathering, you are likely to have people that you might not have seen in a while, or your loved one has seen in a while either. And they're probably going to have some opinions about what you're doing or suggestions about what you can do differently. Some family members might have some really useful advice for you, and that's wonderful. Others might tell you some things that you want to hear that you don't necessarily want or need to hear, even if they're well-intended. So I think, here's some tips that maybe can help with that. So it's always helpful to acknowledge their concern, and then ask them what they would suggest instead. So what this does is it avoids the fight and changes the tone of the conversation. So, for example, your sister might ask you, why did you give mom a cheeseburger and chocolate milk for lunch? That's so unhealthy. Are you trying to give her a heart attack? You could say, I can see that you're concerned, but mom's appetite has been really bad lately. She's hardly eating at all. Her doctor says anything, even less healthy foods, are better than not getting enough nutrition. What other favorites could we offer her? So this is just another way, again, to bring people into your situation, offer them or allow them to share their opinions without getting into a fight. And you can always use I statements too. So here's another example. Your aunt might say, this kitchen isn't as clean as she would used to keep it, and that living room looks like it hasn't been dusted in weeks. Do you even try to keep your mom's house clean? You could say, again, using I statements, it makes me feel unappreciated when you focus on what needs to be done instead of recognizing all the things that I already do for my mom. You know, it's good to stand up for yourself when you're dealing with criticism. I don't know how your aunt would respond to that, but just another example. So another time, again, if people haven't seen each other in a while, another thing you could deal with is denial. And generally people use denial as kind of a coping mechanism. Sometimes it's easier to ignore that your loved one is declining than face the painful reality that they're going downhill or that something's changing. It also might be a way for people who are just either unwilling or unable to take on caregiving responsibilities. So if someone seems to be in denial, again, it may be helpful if they're able to see the loved one in person. However, don't expect their behavior or ability to help to change. People deal with difficult situations in their life differently. So what you could do is you could have a family meeting to kind of discuss everyone's expectations and how to meet your loved one's care needs. What I will say is it might be easier to avoid these conversations about someone's needs during the gathering. In general, it might seem like a great time if everyone's there, but really try to keep the holidays a joyful time and maybe schedule that meeting outside of that time. And then you can talk openly and not have to worry about arguments happening when it's supposed to be a joyful occasion. Another thing you can do too, and this has happened unfortunately in my family, is if there are certain family members who are just, not supportive at all, mean, nasty, or just making things unpleasant, if you're hosting, they don't necessarily need to be invited. If they make you feel guilty, that's one less thing that you need to deal with. So I think that can be hard to make that decision, but that's another thing that you can do. So gift giving. I think gift giving can be difficult when you're caring for someone, trying to know what they need, what you should give them. In general, try to keep things realistic, thoughtful, and useful. So remember that the person you're caring for is battling something that causes negative reactions in their body and also drains their energy. So try to think of things that are realistic for them. So maybe not buying them a heavy item or something that's noisy or flashing that could overstimulate. Exercise is great, but sporting goods might make them feel like they're a failure if they're not able to do certain things. So really think about the person you're caring for, the person that you love, and what might be something useful for them. So some examples that I found, compression socks, some delicious healthy treats maybe that they would like, heated blanket, maybe a massage, or a personalized tumbler to encourage them to drink water. If there's adaptive equipment that they wouldn't feel offended by, and those easy off jar openers can be great. But there's a lot of different ideas if you Google gifts for people living with chronic conditions. If someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, consider gifts that maybe would help with their day-to-day routine, or gifts that are memory triggering or sensory stimulating. So for example, maybe a photo album or a painting of a favorite pet. These gifts can be a great way to bring up positive memories. I know there's another caregiver that we talk to often who put one of those kind of rotating picture frames with different pictures of her husband's time in the military. And that's a really positive association he has, and he loves to share stories when those come up. A sensory stimulating kind of thing. My grandma absolutely loved chocolate. My family is all chocoholics. So anytime we gave her chocolate, she probably didn't need to eat chocolate, but she would just make this noise, and you knew that she absolutely loved that moment. And maybe she wouldn't remember it in 10 minutes, but in that moment, she was loving life and loved that gift. So again, really try to make things personable and kind of trigger those memories or sensory things that are important. The other thing that's great is things that you can do together too. And for the caregiver, so if you're thinking about gifting something for a caregiver in your life, you could offer certain things to help with care needs. So, whether it's paying for certain things, lawn mowing, snow removal, helping to set up things like in-home care, maybe meal assistance, or offering to shop or run errands. Another example is respite too. So, offer, can I come on Fridays at this time to provide some support for you and watch your loved one while you rest or go do something for you? And I think sometimes too, it's hard when the person living with a chronic condition cannot purchase the gift for the caregiver. This is especially true for spouses because generally, husbands and wives probably will get gifts for each other. And maybe a spouse with dementia is no longer able to go out and get a gift. So what can you do to kind of help in this situation? So, you could try to relive some of those favorite memories together. So if there are things as caregivers, as a couple that you used to do, whether it was going out dancing, you could do something like that, watching favorite movies, doing something new together. Again, I mentioned, Susie and her husband and friends going and looking at lights. That's a great example. Experiences versus gifts. Sometimes, continuing to make memories together, having an experience can be more meaningful than a physical gift itself. And again, that's different for everyone, but maybe it's, going and listening to a concert if your person really loves music. Volunteering together to give others gifts. This is a great time of year to volunteer, to, serve the community. My husband and I rang bells the other day, and, that's something that you could do for a half an hour that would be really meaningful. That was for the Salvation Army. Or, gather some donated goods and drop them off. There's lots of ways to give others gifts too, and to put a smile on their face, which can give you a gift in return. And then something that Kathy Good, her support community used to do that I thought was such a great idea is her and her husband's anniversary was around February 14th on Valentine's Day. And so her friends knew that, and what they would do is they would take her husband Dave out shopping, and they would go and get flowers, and Dave was able to pick them out, which was really meaningful. And then they'd usually get something else, and then would be able to give a gift to Kathy then from Dave. And again, he was able to be part of that process, which was really meaningful. So that's another idea too, if you're helping a caregiver in your life. Making memories. So I think, this time of year is all about making memories. And I think part of that too can be leaving a legacy. So how do you share your memories with others? How do you share your memories together? Again, that could be looking at photo books, sharing your favorite stories with each other and your family, passing on those favorite memories that you have. I'll share one of my favorite memories. So I have two younger brothers, and one of them is absolutely obsessed with the game Catchphrase. I call it our forced family gaming time because generally it happens when he's there visiting. So one of the memories that always comes up that makes us smile when we're playing Catchphrase is thinking about my grandparents. My grandma gave the clue when we were playing once. This is something your grandpa and I do occasionally. And lots of ideas were thrown out there. People said, going to the movies, taking a drive, eating ice cream. But she would not give any other clues. It was just something your grandpa and I do occasionally. And eventually the timer ran out, and then we all looked at her and said, "Grandma, what was it?" And she just smiled really big and said, "Make out." And so we all died laughing, and it just makes me smile now just even thinking about it. So every time we play that game, that special memory comes up, and we usually end up sharing it. And it makes me think of my grandparents and in that time that we played. So I think, sharing memories, sharing recipes. We were just talking again before this group started. What are some of those favorite recipes that your family might have that you can pass down to others? My grandpa he was an antique dealer, and he made recipe boxes and then hand wrote he and my grandma's favorite recipes and gave them to all 10 of his grandchildren. And that's one of the most special Christmas gifts I think I've ever received. And I use those recipes too, especially around the holidays, because they're some of our most cherished family recipes in there. Record videos, I don't think we always think about this, but when someone's passed away, having that voice, of the person you love, seeing them move, interact with others can be really powerful. So, if you do take some videos of your time together, you have that memory, not just as a photo, but as kind of a living memory in some way of that person. And create new traditions, which we keep talking about. Are there things that are new? If you have, new family members, the holidays don't always have to be set in stone. Try something different and see if that's a tradition that you might enjoy doing. And then one other thing that I saw online is hiring a photographer, which maybe seems a little much, but I have cousins that do this every single year. And you don't have to do it that often, but it could be really fun to schedule a photographer to take family and individual photos. And I know for my cousins, my aunt has terminal breast cancer. Having those photos of their children with my aunt is something that is very, very meaningful to them. Holidays and dementia. So we've talked about dementia off and on a little bit. But here are just some, general tips that might make things a little more or a little less stressful, I guess. So do what you can to involve that person living with dementia in decisions and holiday preparation. So, what can they do to feel useful? Can they help in the food prep? Peel potatoes or carrots, roll out the cookie dough, wrap packages. I know Kathy used to say her and Dave used to hand stamp their wrapping paper. And so they made that a really special thing when they would wrap presents because it was made with love from both of them. Can they help decorate or set the table or wipe the table off? Can they help decorate the tree? There's a lot of simple things that people living with dementia could do to kind of help in the holiday preparation that would give them some meaning and purpose as well. Try to avoid overstimulation. So again, can your holiday gatherings be in smaller groups for maybe a shorter time? Or if it is a large group, again, can it be for a shorter time period? And maybe it might mean limiting your decorations too. Again, sometimes flashing lights or a lot of extra things that aren't usual around the house can be overstimulating. Try to maintain a normal routine. So I think we already talked about that, but is there a way to kind of make sure that the routine kind of follows the same, even if you do add another gathering in there? Planning activities they will enjoy. So again, things that bring happiness and activities that they can do. So maybe decorating cookies or I don't know, trying to just, again, reduce the stress that they might be feeling as well. and try to focus on the things that bring happiness. So at the end of the day, the most important thing with any holiday gathering is maintaining your relationships, focusing on the joy, and letting go of what's too overwhelming, stressful, or risky. Maybe your loved one lives in a senior living community, assisted living, long-term care. Usually there's probably, well, to help you find a new way to celebrate, there might be 3 questions that you could ask yourself if they do live in a senior community. Should you bring the person you're caring for home? And really that depends on their stamina, their condition, and their ability to adapt to new situations. Again, if they had dementia, it might be a little bit more difficult to do this. So if you feel like your person has the ability to do that, it could be worth a try. What about if the person you're caring for is no longer aware of the holidays? Even if someone doesn't seem engaged with the world around them, they will likely enjoy spending time with you and your family. They might not know who you are, but they'll know that you're someone who cares about them and is enjoying being around them. You might want to keep them in their surrounding if they live outside the home, depending on how they do with outings. And you can turn that visit into a festive occasion. So, is there music that they love? My grandma absolutely loved Christmas music. So anytime you played Christmas music, she would sing along with, all her heart, and it just brought a smile to everyone's face. Could you go for a drive, or again, look at old photos together? And what festive activities work well in a care center or assisted living? So again, we've talked about this, smaller groups, fewer decorations, things that aren't overwhelming or overstimulating. I think it's important. We live in a time of, COVID right now, so make sure you call first if you're planning something to check in about COVID precautions. You can always participate. Usually different centers have scheduled events or gatherings. Call ahead to see what they might have and if you're able to participate in them. If you're gathering in their space, there might be a limited number of visitors due to COVID, but if not, try to limit the number of visitors so it's not so overwhelming. If there's a bigger gathering space, maybe you can reserve it so there's more room to spread out. And then if they have favorite treats or photos or handmade decorations from their mother or whatever, you can bring those in too. We talked about visits outside of the building. Again, know their limits, and then decorate if desired to make their space feel festive. So a little bit about grief. Grief doesn't always take a back seat at the holidays, and can often be magnified. And it's important to acknowledge your feelings and try not to avoid them during this time. It's okay to have both, some of those sad and negative feelings maybe even, and also feel positive about the holiday at the same time. You can miss both the person and also enjoy what you're doing at the same time. There's no right or wrong way. So basically, recognize how you're feeling and acknowledge that the holiday may bring out some difficult memories, and allow yourself to feel those. So whether you're feeling joy, sadness, anger, it's okay to sit in those and allow yourself recognize that those might happen. And then set some boundaries with the events you might be attending. Do what makes the most sense to you, and try not to feel guilty about what you cannot do. Maybe next year you'll be in a different place, and that's okay. Surround yourself with those people who love you and support you, and don't make you feel guilty or don't make you commit either way to coming to something that won't judge you in whatever you decide or need to do. Honor old traditions and memories. So if you feel up to it and want to do something that you've always done that'll help you remember holidays of past or those people that you love, do it. Or maybe it is a time to try something new. try a new tradition or ritual. Some examples could be maybe your father who passed away always carved the turkey. So announce beforehand that someone else will carve the turkey. Maybe it's lighting a candle in honor of the person you love, or putting together a bouquet of flowers on your holiday table in honor of the person you're loved. I think too, there's lots of wonderful ways to make ornaments or, commemorative pillows or, whatever you want to do. I mentioned our family, play your loved one's favorite music or favorite game to bring back those memories that you love. I think it can be helpful to identify some coping mechanisms for grief. So prior to the holiday season beginning, consider creating a list of your go-to coping skills to use whether you're at home or at a social function. So when that grief hits you unexpectedly, you have some tools that you can use to pull out. So everyone's different, but some examples are deep breathing, taking a walk, journaling, maybe listening to music or practicing yoga, or maybe you have a positive affirmation that helps you. The real important thing is to recognize that, everyone's grief is unique and that coping skills are too. So whatever works for you might not work for someone else and vice versa. And then like we've talked about, sometimes doing things for others can really boost your morale and your soul. So, is there a way that you can do something to help others who need it? And maybe you're not the one who's grieving, but maybe someone else in your life is, and they're coming to your gathering. So, if they're coming, invite them, offering companionship, unconditional love. Try listening and just acknowledging their loss and expressing your care versus offering too much advice. People most of the time just need someone to be there with them and witness to their grief. Give permission to change their mind if desired. So if they say yes, they're coming one day and no, they aren't the next day, that's okay. Ask them what helps and be open to what doesn't. So again, everyone's different and some people might find certain things are more helpful to them than others. So if they want to include the deceased loved one in the holidays, wonderful. If that's too painful for them, that's okay too. And take the time to tell stories and look at old photos if they want to. I think probably that's a little hard if it's someone you're having a gathering and it's a family member that passed, because again, everyone's situation is going to be different. So trying to navigate that, if multiple people have different ways they want to express their memory of their loved one, might be a little challenging. And understand there's no set time frame for someone who's grieving to be over it or move on. So again, that's that understanding and patience with that person. And the last slide here is about self-care. So what can you do to take care of yourself during the holidays? And one thing that I think can be really useful is, and this is just in life in general, is relaxing and setting a 10-minute intentional pause. So it can be easy just to power through caregiving in the holidays, but taking no breaks can really lead to burnout. So maybe it's putting a timer on your phone and taking a 10-minute intentional break. Sit down with your feet up, read the mail, do something else than what you were doing, watch the birds, sit by your loved one and hold their hand. Just do something where you're just being, basically, and taking 10 minutes of rest. And if you can do that every day or a couple times a day, it kind of helps clear your head and allows you to continue on with the task that you were doing. Breathing deeply is a great way to take care of yourself. It helps center yourself, especially if you're entering into something chaotic. So maybe, everyone's in your house, you're hosting. Before you enter the room, just take a deep cleansing breath and kind of recenter yourself before you walk in. Journaling can be really powerful. This time of year, focusing on gratitude can be really helpful. It can help you really focus on there's still good in your life, even if you are dealing with some really stressful things. So if you can jot down at least 3 things you're grateful for, or do a quick gratitude exercise, or tell someone why you are grateful for them, that can really change your mood, and kind of help switch how you're thinking and feeling about things. Listening to joyful music or something that kind of gets you pepped up can be good. Finding reasons to laugh. This probably shouldn't be funny, but I was looking at Facebook this morning before I came to work, and I have a friend who's just turning 40 this year. And the first birthday card she got was someone from Mercy. And what it was an ad basically where Mercy was saying happy birthday. And also, it's a great time to come in and get a mammogram. And so I just started laughing this morning reading that. And honestly, it was a great way to start my day because, humor can kind of change things around, even if you're having a rough start. Find a self-care buddy. So if you have a good friend that's also a caregiver that's going through a similar thing, that's wonderful. If you have a family member, if you have someone from your church, maybe it's someone here at the center that you can call and kind of will help you hold yourself accountable as you're going through a difficult time. And as I've said before, remember to focus on your relationships. There's so many things, so many rituals, lots of stuff you can do over the holidays, but at the end of the day, the relationships you have with those you love is the most important. So even if you don't accomplish anything on your to-do list, if you spent time enjoying life, holding someone's hand, just smiling with them, that makes all the difference. And that's really what you're going to remember at the end of the day, is those times with others that you care about, not necessarily how wonderful your turkey was. So hopefully all of this has been helpful. I know we covered a lot of stuff.